Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a question that is absolutely critical when it comes to your rights at work. Are you an employee or are you a contractor? Believe me, the answer can mean the difference between having a whole safety net of legal protections or having none at all.
So, picture this. You've got a job. Maybe you're getting paid cash in hand. It's been going fine for a while, and then one day, it's just over. You're told not to come back. What happens now? Can you even do anything about it? Well, the answer to that really hangs on this one crucial distinction.
And the stakes? They are incredibly high. See, if you're legally considered an employee here in Australia, you get some fundamental protections. You can fight back against an unfair dismissal, you're entitled to superannuation, that's your employer chipping in for your retirement, and you get things like paid sick leave and holidays. An independent contractor, on the other hand, is basically treated like their own business. They're pretty much on their own without those same built-in rights.
Now, this isn't just some dry legal theory. Let's dive into the real-life case of Miss Jessica Dixon, a nanny from Queensland whose job came to a sudden halt and put this exact question to the test. And the outcome? Well, it's pretty surprising.
So here's a quick look at how it all went down. Miss Dixon had been working for this family for over a year. Then, her hours got cut way back, and not long after that, her employment was terminated completely. Feeling like she was dismissed unfairly, she took her case to the Fair Work Commission. But her former employers, they immediately tried to get her case thrown out, which set the stage for a major showdown.
Their entire argument, their whole strategy, boiled down to this one claim. They said she was a contractor, which meant she legally couldn't be dismissed in the first place, and because of that, she had no case. If they were right, her claim would be dead in the water before it even got started.
Now, here's where things get really interesting. A text message from Ms. Dixon herself seems to back up the employer's story. On the surface, it looks like she was perfectly fine with being a contractor, right? This text perfectly captures the confusion that got this whole thing sent to the commission. So, the Fair Work Commission had a real puzzle on its hands. It basically had to put on its detective hat and look right past the labels in the text messages to figure out what was really going on with Ms. Dixon's work.
And the main tool they use for this is called the totality of the relationship test. It's a bit of a mouthful, but just think of it like a detective's magnifying glass. It's a huge deal in Australian workplace law. It means the commission doesn't just glance at a contract or a job title. Nope. It looks at the entire picture, the day-to-day, practical reality of how the job actually worked.
Okay, so let's start with the most obvious question, right? If she said in a text message she was okay with being a contractor, isn't that case closed? Well, not so fast. The commission basically said that labels can be super misleading, and that one text message is a long way from a formal binding agreement. And get this, the employer himself, in a different text, called her more than an employee, which just confused things even more. It always comes back to the reality of the job, not what somebody decided to call it.
All right, so the next big question the commission had to tackle was this. Was Miss Dixon actually operating her own independent nannying business, and was this family just one of her clients?
The evidence on this was pretty clear-cut. She didn't have an ABN. That's an Australian business number you need to run a business. She wasn't sending them invoices, and she had no other nannying clients. Her only other job was a standard employee role at a childcare center. The commission's conclusion was blunt. They said she was acting as a servant of the household, totally woven in their daily lives, not some external business owner.
And this brings us to what is so often the make or break factor in these situations: control. Who was actually calling the shots? Who decided how, when, and where the work got done? Turns out the employers had a ton of control. They told her when and where to take the kids for appointments. They directed her to do household chores like cleaning and grocery shopping. They even set up daily exercise schedules for the children. And her hours? They weren't up to her. They were negotiated every single week based on what the family needed. She had very little say in how she did her job, which is a classic sign of an employment relationship.
But just when you think the case is pretty clear, a really strange piece of evidence came to light that just added a wild new twist to the story, and it came directly from the employer.
So to help Miss Dixon apply for a rental property, her employer actually created 2 fake payslips for her. And these weren't just scribbled notes, they were made to look official, showing things like withheld tax and superannuation payments, the stuff you only see in a standard employment situation.
You can imagine what the commission thought about that. It clearly showed a willingness to present her as an employee to the outside world whenever it was convenient.
So after weighing all of the evidence, from the text messages and the issue of control all the way to those fake payslips, the commission was finally ready to make its call.
Looking at the totality of the relationship, the reality of how she actually worked every day, the commission handed down a clear and decisive ruling. Miss Dixon was in fact an employee. She was not an independent contractor.
And that ruling was a really big deal. It meant the employer's attempt to block her case completely failed. She won the right to have her unfair dismissal claim properly heard by the commission, which opened the door for things like compensation.
So what's the big lesson here for all of us? Well, this case gives us a fantastic, real-world checklist to help figure out our own work situations. Don't just get hung up on a job title. Ask yourself, who really has the control here? Am I genuinely running my own business? How integrated am I into the company or household? You've got to look at the whole picture.
And that leaves us with one final, and I think really empowering question to think about. It's not about what your job is called, it's about the real substance of what you do day in and day out, and, more importantly, the rights that you are truly owed because of it. So maybe take a second to think about your own job. Are you really getting all the rights you deserve?